Hello class, hope you all are fine. So today we are going to continue our topic flower and seed dispersal in chapter 2 plants and photosynthesis. Pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower. Many flowers can self-pollinate. Self-pollination occurs when the pollen from the anther of one flower is transferred to the stigma of the same flower or to the stigma of another flower on the same plant. Flowers may be pollinated by wind or by animals such as insects, birds, and bats. Using insects. Flowers that are pollinated by animals usually have colorful petals and nice scents. These attract animals to the flowers. These animals may be rewarded with pollen in the flower. Flowers that are pollinated by animals also usually have sticky pollen. The sticky pollen can stick onto the bodies of the pollinators. When the pollinators move from one flower to another to feed, they transfer some of the pollen to the stigma of the flower. Relying on the wind. Relying on the wind means pollination by wind. Flowers pollinated by wind usually have white or dull color small petals. The flowers are usually unscented too. Some wind pollinated flowers do not even have petals. This is because they do not need to attract animals for pollination. Instead, they produce lots of tiny and light pollen grains that can be easily carried by the wind. Fertilization. After pollination, each pollen grain that has landed on the stigma will develop a tiny tube called a pollen tube. The pollen tube will grow downwards through the style of the flower and into the ovary. The male reproductive cell from the pollen grain travel down the pollen tube and enter the ovule. In the ovule, it fuses with the egg. The fusion of the male reproductive cell with the egg to form a fertilized egg is called fertilization. The fertilized egg grows into an embryo and the ovule produces a seed to protect it. As the seed develops, the ovary forms a fruit around it. If the ovary wall becomes very hard, the fruit is called a nut. Germination. The seed that are dispersed will develop into young plant if the conditions are right. The development of seed into young plant is called germination. In general, seed need water, oxygen in the air, and the right temperature to germinate. Seeds need water to soften and break the seed coat. Oxygen is needed for a process called respiration. Respiration releases energy from the food stored into the seed leaf. Seeds germinate at a range of temperatures. Some need low temperature to germinate while others need warm temperature. Most seeds do not need light to germinate, otherwise they would not be able to germinate in the dark soil. Germinating seeds get their food from their seed leaves. They need light to make food only when they grow their own leaves and the stored food in the seed leaves are used up. Seed dispersal. Plants make seed that can grow into new plants. But if the seed just fall to the ground under the parent plant, they might not get enough sun, water, or nutrient from the soil. Because plants cannot walk around and take their seed to other places. They have developed other methods to disperse or move their seed. The most common methods are wind, water, animals, or explosion. Exploding pads, wind and water. Some plants have pads that explode when drip and shoot out the seeds. Pea and bean plant also keep their seed in a pad. When the seeds are ripped and the pad has dried, the pad bursts open and the peas and beans are scattered. Many plants have seeds that use water as mean of dispersal. The seeds float away from the parent plant. Mangrove tree grow near water. If a mangrove seed fall during low tide, it can begin to root in the soil. If the seeds fall in the water, they are carried away by the tide to grow somewhere else. Seeds from plants like swan plants and cottonwood trees are light and have feathery parachute and can be carried long distance by the winds. Using animals to spread seeds. Some fruits that are dispersed by animals are not sweet and juicy. Instead, they have hooks or stuffed hairs that cling onto the fur of passing animals or to the clothes of humans. When the animals move around, they help to scatter the seeds far away from their parent plant. Home assignment. Answer the following questions in your notebook.